Hi, do you want to know how transport management systems fit into the logistics landscape in an easy to understand way? I'm Luke Saunders, and with 15 years experience in logistics and warehouse systems, my aim is to do just that. Today's agenda, we're going to cover a number of topics. The first, what is a TMS? The second, we're going to look at the key actors involved in the TMS platform. We're then going to look at a functional overview, and this will include looking at a use case diagram in order to show the functions from an overview perspective. And then we'll end looking at the key benefits of a transport management system. So, what is a TMS? We are going to answer three simple questions, and that's what, who, and why. So let's start with what. What is a TMS? A transport management system is a logistics platform that uses tech to enable businesses to plan and optimize the physical movement of goods. So it allows businesses to follow standard processes and ensure the correct visibility for the movement of those goods, right from the collection through to the delivery to the final mile destination. So that's what a TMS is. We're then going to look at who would use a TMS. So there are a number of different entities that would use a TMS. So the first are manufacturers. The second could be distributors. You then have your e-commerce companies, and then one of the biggest users of a TMS would be your 3 and 4PL logistics companies. So we've answered the what and the who. What about the why? So why would they want to use a TMS? Well, firstly, it comes down to data. So success of the delivery of goods and the transit of goods from being collected to being delivered can only really be confirmed by the data that you have. Customers rarely will go out of their way to commend a successful delivery. So a TMS can hold the data for when the delivery should have arrived and when it physically did, in order for you to be able to tell whether you've had a successful delivery or not. Because every customer that gets bad service will tell you they won't always come back and say you've done a good job. The second is standardization. Do you care that DHL are delivering your latest iPhone or TV? Probably not. But you do care that the goods you receive are delivered in a timely fashion. So you have a picture of this as part of the service from the client that you're purchasing those goods from. Having standard processes means that no matter the carrier that's used in the system, you can offer the same user experience to your end customer. So standardization is really key. And then lastly, gaining efficiencies. So having a single platform or collection of systems that drive standard processes will bring consistency, and this consistency will basically enable a better experience for your end customer. And not just your end customer, but any user of that particular system. It doesn't matter whether the shipment is going by DHL, TNT, FedEx, or your own network. You can give that same experience because it's been delivered by the same platform, the TMS. So let's look at the key actors. So the main one would be the client or the shipper. So this particular person is obviously going to be the one that's requesting the service to deliver their goods or collect them. You then have the receiver. So this would generally be the client's customer. So what's really key in the logistics kind of landscape is we need to make sure that we're delivering on our client's promise to its customer. So the client's promise in this case to the receiver. And that's really where logistics fits in, because it doesn't matter how good a service you're offering, the end receiver isn't really so bothered about the service as they are about receiving that good in a timely fashion. So we need to make sure that we are not taken away from the item the client's delivering to their receiver. We then have the carrier itself. So this could be your DHL, TNT. I mean, it could be, in some circumstances, it could be your own network. You then have the customer service team. So you're going to have your customer service team that are using the transport management system. There may be standard functions they're doing in there, could be reports. They may have to step in on certain consignments in order to investigate those. So they're really key as a system actor. And then you have the finance team. As with all of these transactions, they need to be chargeable. So when our client is requesting a delivery, they will be charged for that. And then equally, the carrier that is taking action on that shipment, will it be expecting payment as well? So these are the 5 key actors. Now, that's not to say these are the only actors as part of a TMS. There are various different functionalities and some that may not be covered within this particular presentation. But these are the core ones for the system. Next, we'll then look at the system overview. So for our system overview, we're going to use a use case diagram. Nice and simple. In the front here, we've got our transport management system. So within this, we're going to show the various different functions within a TMS. Here on the outside, we've got our actors. We have our client or shipper. We then have our receiver. On the other side here, we have the carrier being represented by a service that we're going to be calling. We then have the customer service team, and then finally the finance team. So the first function we're going to be looking at is creating a shipment. So here, this is going to be predominantly instigated by our client or shipper. So this could be system integration, it could be they're interacting with the system, but they're going to create a shipment. Now, in order to create a shipment, they need various different elements and to create it. So, for instance, the transport management system will need to know who that's being created for, so the account. They also need to know things like the collection and the delivery address, the weights and dimensions, and then the service potentially that shipment's being shipped on, whether it's express, economy, whether it's some sort of tail lift service, etc. And when we're talking about that being created by the client shipper, that could really be a system potentially. So in my previous video, and I recommend you have a look at that around WMS systems, we talk there about the fact that when we're shipping something from a warehouse, we'll eventually get a label and we're creating a shipment. Now, that system would potentially talk to a TMS in order to get that label and the shipment information through in order to send the manifest to the supplier. So when we're talking about a client or shipper here, this could really be a system or an entity as well. So as well as providing the address information and the weights and dimensions for our shipment, we would also then need any potential documentation. So things like the commercial invoices, any details around that, and also any hazardous documentation as well. So if there's any hazmat on the shipment, that would need to be declared, and that would also form data around the shipment. Because although we'll have the documentation attached to it, there'll be the digital side of it that would then be used later on to decide whether a particular carrier may or may not handle it, or a particular service may or may not handle that. If you're sending, very hazardous materials, it may be then they can't go on a plane, for instance. So as well as that, detailed within that shipment will be any access restrictions. So if, for instance, you can only drop off or pick up between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., that would have to be declared on there as well. If there are any requirements for a tail lift, or if it was a two-man delivery, again, that would need to be specified so that we've got that full picture of the shipment. And then equally, depending on whether it's traveling across different services, there may well be instances where we need to consider what we call multi-legs. And an example of that could be that you're collecting a tractor part from Germany, for instance, bringing that into the UK. So that'll be coming over potentially on a haulage, on a flight. So you might have a trunk flight coming over. You could then have a carrier picking that up from the airport and then delivering that into a potential dealer, for instance. So if you've got that going on, you may have 2 or 3 legs of the delivery there, where you might have 3 different services being used. So there may be, for instance, a need to have multiple labels potentially identifying that shipment in order to allow that to be tracked through those various carriers. But there may well be certain other things that need to be considered as part of that. So that's our creation of the shipment. And as we go through the transport management system functions, we're almost going to see what I like to call like the life cycle of a shipment. And we are looking at this really in the terms of a single shipment, but this could be that the client's creating lots and lots of shipments, and then we have like a full load or multiple loads that then need to be managed out as well. So that shipment creation, once the shipment has been created, and although it has been created by the client here, potentially it could be someone phoning or contacting a customer service team, so they could also instigate that as well. But we're trying to keep this diagram quite clean just so it's easier for interpretation. So after the creation of a shipment, we are then looking at routing. So we need to route that shipment. So routing the shipment in its simplest terms would be assigning the carriers that are needed in order to ship that particular or move that particular item. So your TMS may have a whole load of built-in logic in there where if it's a multi-leg shipment, it will then go off and it can then query to the carrier and create those various records and the information needed for that. You may have some logic in here around least cost. So it could be looking at which carrier is the cheapest and do multiple calls, or based on the services, what ones are available. It may even be looking at things like the quickest route. So it could be you're managing your own network and you've got your own network available, and it may be that actually that's the best option there for it as well, because you've got someone there, they're already in the area, and you can allocate that collection for them to pick up. You may also be building loads, so you've got all of that various sort of logic there that may be happening within the TMS. And there's different ways that you can have this carrier integration in place. So you might have that logic built directly into your TMS system there. So you could have it built in as sort of development within the system. You might have all of the routing and pricing data for TNT, DHL, FedEx, whoever you're using, and it will use that, and it's able to use that to allocate the supplier, and then it can talk to the carrier when it needs to send the manifest information, etc. You might have an implanted system. The TMS might drop it out to another system and you've got an implanted system somewhere. Or more likely, you could, as well as having it developed, you may have a carrier management solution bolted onto your TMS. So you could have something like Enshift or Metapack that is able to speak to the carriers using your account details, and you're able to route the information or route the shipment based on that. So between the routing of a shipment, you're going to have that talking directly to the carrier in order to do that. Now, outside of those scenarios, you might have a really urgent item that needs to be handheld or a direct run for whatever reason. It doesn't really fit into your standard routing. Generally speaking, TMSs will cover most things, but not 100%. So depending on the type of businesses you're dealing with, you might have a requirement here that sits outside of the norm. If I can get that to work, there we go. So with that in mind, you might actually need your customer service representative to actually route the shipment. So they might have to go in manually and assign the carrier in essence that are going to be assigned to that particular shipment. So you've got that possibility as well. But assuming all of that's okay, we're going to have a shipment created now that has a carrier or carriers assigned to it. Once that's done, what we then have to have is what we call the the cost and charge. So we've got to have, it needs to calculate the system, the TMS will need to calculate, and this could potentially happen before it's routed. You might have fixed rates. So if you've got a fixed rate for a customer, you might go, well, actually, that's always going to cost, £140 or whatever. And it might automatically assign what the potential charge would be for the client. But the cost side may not be built in. You might have pre-agreed arrangements with your carrier and it's already configured, or it could be that every time you route your shipment, it will go to the carrier based on the pre-agreed rates and return the price and update that. So again, part of that process, you've got to have your cost and your charge calculated. So that could be done, as we've just discussed, by talking to the carrier. That also may be done manually as well, or with some sort of intervention from the customer service representative. So again, just depends on that side. So once you've got the cost and charge assigned there, and again, you have to understand the service to be able to do that. It may be your TMS goes, well, actually, I'm going to go to the carrier, get the price, and it's always a 25% upcharge or uplift on that charge. There may well be certain costs that are already built into the rates around daily collections, so you haven't got to worry about arranging a carrier to go and collect the goods because you're running your network and they go in there daily, or it's already pre-agreed with your carrier, your service provider, that they're going to do that. Once you've got your cost and charge all assigned there, we're then pretty much ready to go. So what we mean by that is everything's ready and we can basically confirm the shipment. And what confirming the shipment does is that says it's now ready to be collected. So that could be someone in customer service could be going into the system there and they could be, going, yep, that's all good. That's ready for collection. Or there could be an automated routine that goes through and actually confirms those automatically in some sort of schedule cron job, for instance. So once that has been confirmed, it's at that point that you then have you're then going to generate your labels and the manifest. So these processes are fairly linked. So the confirmed shipment and the generate labels and manifest would be quite a short period of time potentially between those. So you confirm it at that point, you're going, yes, we're ready. And at that point, then it would then generate the labels. You'd have your labels there, and then you'd also have your manifest. So that would then be talking potentially to your carrier. So you'd have a carrier service go, yep, okay, we've got a cost and charge, we've routed. Yep, we want our labels. Yep, we're good to go. There's the manifest information there. And again, that manifest is a list of all the shipments that are going to that carrier and the service they're going on. That will contain things like any commercial invoice information as well. That will contain any of the hazardous documentation potentially, because again, this confirming shipment process is making sure it is good to ship. So not only have we got everything, we've got the charges, we know where it's going from, and two, that it has everything in place that we need. So we've got our labels, the labels are generated, the manifest is there, and we're good and we're ready to go. So again, the labels will vary depending on what carrier you're using. If you're using, for instance, I've got a TNT label here, I can just drag on screen. So we've got a delivery address, we'll have the collection address there as well. There'll be various routing information, so depot numbers, etc. What's really interesting about this particular label is we've got our standard sort of barcode here, but we've also got what we call a 2D barcode, where we can contain a lot more information in there. And this helps, for instance, FedEx UK, because if there is a problem with the transmission of data during the manifest process, when this gets collected and it turns up, they're actually able to scan this barcode and it contains everything that the manifest contained anyway. So it's kind of a bit of a backup document as well. And again, depending on the carrier and where they are with their tech stack, will depend on what they're able to offer with regards to some of these solutions. So that's quite a nice solution from a carrier, because again, it's a little bit of a fallback in case there are problems in transmitting data, integration, any service issues there. You're able to kind of run manually with the information that's contained within that 2D barcode. So that manifest obviously is a shipment, a list of the shipments that we're going to be sending. That could be sent via API, it could be sent via EDI, it could be, for instance, an email. It will be dependent on the capability and tech stack of that particular carrier. We're looking at this really as probably an API or an EDI feed there, really. But yeah, that's again the labels and the manifest side. So, based on the fact that we've now declared that those goods are ready to go, they've been picked up, the carrier's there, we're then going to start potentially getting updates for the tracking side. So, as the shipment transitions through its various stages, we're going to start receiving tracking messages for those particular shipments. Equally, outside of automated tracking, we could also have our customer service team go in and update tracking for a particular shipment as well. You know, they might be aware of something, they might be speaking to a supplier or whatever, and they can go in and update that. What is really good with the tracking side of things and how a TMS works is because you've got a central system and you've got various different carriers providing that information, your TMS can basically transform that tracking information into your various different pre-established milestones. And what do I mean by that? Well, FedEx might turn up and they pick up the goods, and their first scan may actually be at the depot, and you can go, yep, it's a depot scan. You could well have a different carrier that scan it as they load it onto their vehicle. You know, someone's card left code could be 4523, and then someone else's could be XYZP. So you get all these different carriers supplying different information in different formats with different codes with different explanations. And that's a lot of different. And what a TMS can do is start funneling that information. And it's where the data becomes really key to ensure that you can give a single picture in the TMS to your customer service team, to your client and your shipper, to your finance team, to everyone, of what does this shipment look like. So those predefined milestones could be that the manifest data has been received. So as we manifest those shipments, the carrier can then go, yep, we've got an update for this shipment. We've received the data. They can then scan when they collect it. You can then have it's arrived at the hub. It's been sorted. It's then out for delivery, and it's been delivered. And then you've got like the final one of a POD, so the proof of delivery. So those would be the sort of standard end-to-end tracking messages that you'd get for a shipment. However, outside of that, you could end up getting some errors. So it could be card left, no one was in. There could have been, the flight could have gone technical. So, they've had an issue and actually the line haul's not gone, it's still stuck in Germany. It could be lost and it's under investigation. But what is really important is that with all that tracking information, we're able to solidify that into a single view, be incredibly transparent, so we're able to get that, because at the end of the day, no one likes losing an item, be it a carrier or a client, and certainly not the receiver. So the only positive you can do is be as transparent as possible. And what's really good for TMS is you're able to do that. So you've got all that information coming from your carrier and your customer service representative, and you're able to put various milestones in and able to translate that data into something that someone can understand. So it could be you know, the flight's gone technical, something's happened, something's with the captain, but really there's been a delay, and it's the delays because of X, Y, and Z. And then you might have someone that's reviewing that, and they'll give you some more information that so that you can understand from a client perspective what's going on with um, that particular shipment. Something I've missed out here, I've just noticed as well. Obviously, we're generating our labels, or we're going to have generated our labels, and again, they would have been supplied back to the client or shipper. So we've got that various information there, and at the end of the day, the integration allows us to have the most up-to-date information, to be transparent, and you know, in the worst case scenario, customer service are able to step in and update the tracking information manually. And then from a client perspective, they see, oh, there's been a delay, X, Y, and Z, you know, vehicles stuck on the M25, whatever it is there. So that's our tracking information. Moving on from tracking then, and still keeping in the same light as tracking, is we've got our POD update. So a really key milestone for our delivery is that it's been picked up and it's been delivered. So when it's delivered to our receiver is then going to, in essence, be able to provide a POD. Now, realistically, they're providing it, but actually, it's probably the carrier turning up. You know, the driver hands you the pad, you sign away on it. But yeah, so just pictorially, we've got the receiver there that's going to provide the POD update. Or, like we say, it could really be, and it's more likely to be, the actual carrier. Depending who the carrier is, you get some carriers where, unfortunately, they're not particularly good at getting PODs. A lot of them now, with the latest technology, and again with a lot of SLAs at the moment, they all very much want to make sure they've got their PODs. But if they haven't, it could well be that, you know, the receiver contacts or whatever and goes, "Yep, I've received it. That's fine. It's sorted." It could well be that for whatever reason there's a problem with the carrier, and for instance, the customer service representative may actually be marking that as updated once they've acknowledged or had acknowledgement that that POD has been received. Now, that POD, depending on the carrier, can be a physical name. So it'll be, you know, oh, this has been collected by or signed for by Luke Saunders. They can also, depending on who the carrier is, actually supply the signature. And I know with various different carriers that providing that information sometimes is really key, because, you know, oh yeah, Steve, it's Steve in the warehouse. Yep. So they write Steve down on there, and later the receiver goes, oh, Steve's saying he hasn't got it. But if you can provide a physical signature, it really cements the fact, oh yeah, that is Steve's signature. Steve, you must have forgot, you definitely did sign for it. All right, yeah, okay, yeah, I did. So that POD is really key. Now, that potentially is a life cycle of a shipment from a client to receiver perspective. But moving on from that, we've got a couple more processes. So again, all businesses need to make a profit. So we need to generate sales invoices. So there is going to be a process once we've got our shipment created to basically generate sales invoices. So our finance team is going to create or generate sales invoices in order to collect the money for the services. So they're going to do that, and then the finance operation may not actually sit directly within the TMS. We're describing it this way because it's an easier way of showing this, but it could be that the TMS outputs data to a finance package, and then they run their process of generating invoices, sales invoices in this case, in the finance package. We're demonstrating it here just as a holistic view, and then from there, your generated sales invoices will then go to your client or your shipper. So they can be automatically generated. It may be that they're generated on review via finance team once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever that is, and that will send those off. So as well as that, we've obviously got to pay our suppliers. So we'll have a process where we're processing supplier invoices. And again, that's our finance function here. And then also we're obviously going to need to pay in some means or others, or other the supplier. So we'll be running that supplier process through, and there'll be some sort of process there where we're sending payment to the supplier. Outside of those processes, we're then going to have various different things, various different things going on here, which will include potentially, let's say, generation. Generate reports. So we are going to generate reports. So there'll be reporting functions within the whole system for various different metrics. Predominantly, you'll have your customer service team that will be generating those, and then they'll be able to use those in order to supply those to the client. So there may well be a requirement that every month the client, or every week the client, wants a list of all the shipments, proof of PODs, etc. on there. So those reports are able to be managed within the TMS and generated that way. Now, it could be that those reports want to be used by the finance team or by another member of customer service to find out what's the revenue by client. It could be looking at things like the performance indicators, the carriers. Again, data is really, really key. And within the transport management system, we've got all the data. We know when the shipment was created. We know when it was picked up, collected, delivered, if it wasn't delivered, when it should have been delivered by, because again, we've routed the shipment, so we've got a service, so we know what the SLA should have been. So we're able to do all of that, and then we can build up a bigger picture. And what's really great with transport management systems is it's the data that's really key. So using that data, we're able to then do metrics on our suppliers. So the supplier turns around and says, actually, we deliver 97% of our deliveries. But do they deliver 95% of our deliveries on time for us? And within the TMS system, you'll be able to generate reports that will basically go against the supplier and grab when the SLA was and when it was physically delivered, and basically see, based on those metrics, whether they met their own SLAs. And if they aren't, you can then start squeezing them and going, well, why, and trying to find out. And if they are a very poor performing supplier, you can then start going in and potentially adjusting your routing logic in order to potentially start avoiding that supplier. And again, with the likes of AI nowadays, you can build all of that potentially into your solution so that you can start making this routing shipment process a lot more intelligent, and be able to use the supplier that's best suited to not only the client and the service you get, but maybe the area. And that really covers the system overview. So here we've got the core functions. There will be other functions outside of this. I mentioned before about network management and management of routes as well. So we could potentially look at expanding the shipment management and looking at that further. But this gives a very high level overview of the various different functionalities and who in the system would be involved at what point. Finally, let's take a look at the overview of the benefits of a TMS. So one of the main benefits of a TMS is the standard processes. So standardization is really key. And really here, it's the standard tracking events across all the carriers. So being able to standardize those means that you get a holistic view of all of your shipments, no matter who the end carrier was. Also, you have simpler reporting. You can report on all various aspects of your movements within a single platform and get a single view of that. With it being a standardized TMS, you'll also find it's a lot easier to train new staff. You haven't got to worry too much about the nuances of who the end carrier is, how the shipment's formed, where it's coming in from, whether there's multiple carriers or not. The fact that you've got a collective system or group of systems, or even a single system supporting that TMS functionality, it will make it significantly easier to train staff. The next main benefit is around integration. So with a TMS, you'll tend to get a lot of integration points and a lot of automation within the functionality there as well. So you get reduced manual processes. It also allows for more freight optimization. If you've got a transport management system that's able to utilize all the various different suppliers you've got in the correct way, or if you've got it managing your network, you're able to ensure that you're creating full loads, that you're optimizing your carriers in the best way you can, and also ensuring that they're able to meet the requirements for your client based on the data that you collect. Finally, you've got carrier access. So built within your TMS, you may have carrier integration built in there anyway as part of the TMS being supplied, or maybe as part of the development that's being done in that TMS. But equally, you can link to some carrier management systems here. So for instance, we've got Enshift and Metapack as a example. All of this gives you added integration, gives you reduced manual processes, and really does optimize the business solution. That's it for now. Thank you very much. Please feel free, if you have any questions, to ask and reach out either on YouTube or on LinkedIn. Thank you for your time.